Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of... Hey, Teddy, what can't we do? We can't stop what?
Snapping!
Oh,
Especially
my
in
God.
Conquest.
Yes. Well, actually, side note, before I introduce myself as Brad, otherwise known as Bradsver, and this is my friend Teddy. Hi, Teddy.
How's it going?
Have you noticed that in Conquest, the Proving Grounds has become a bit more sweaty? Like, even the Proving Grounds has become more sweaty, in my experience. Like, people aren't doing that, like, oh, snap initially, get to 8 cubes, and then dip immediately. I'm actually noticing I've actually played way more genuine-feeling games in Proving Grounds, and I have to double-check and go, like, did I just play Proving Grounds, or was I in silver or gold?
Right. No, definitely. I feel like I still get occasionally people who will hit me with the emote and then snap and then spam it for like the first turn. But if I don't, they just let it go and then they'll play like a sweaty game after that rather than being chaos the whole way through. And I like that. I like that Proving Grounds has kind of equalized. I think that people getting whipped in Infinite and Gold was like, all right, I need to actually like practice decks before I run them up higher. So they want that more competitive experience.
Yeah, and I mean, when it comes to the competitive experience of Conquest, I found it to be liberating to an extent. I was talking to a friend of mine who played Marvel Snap when it first came out, dropped it, gave it another chance a little bit later, and then has since dropped it again. And I was telling him, I'm like, hey, I know they're fixing some things with like the spotlight caches and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And it's not perfect because when he was playing, Series 3 was 76 cards. Now it's 99 cards.
Oh, man.
So, you know, that's already daunting in its own right. I don't even think he started Series 3 yet. I think he was like almost on his Pool 2.
Gotcha. So he was feeling collection fatigue in Series 2?
Pretty much, yeah. Like he was saying because he's like, none of the decks that are available to you at these levels are very interesting to me. I don't want to just play bad, destroy decks or like just weird Devil Dino decks. I want to play like the actual cards. And he's like, if they just gave like a blanket thing, is like I'd pay like $70, the same price I paid for Diablo 4, by the way, to just like get all the cards and be done with it. And he's like, I know they won't do that because of the way they want to monetize it, but I'd rather do that. But anyway,
what does the Pro Bundle get you if you're like right at the beginning of Series 3?
Oh, it's like 200 levels.
It's just 200 levels, so it would be 1.5 spotlight caches. That's all?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Dude, they have to update that. Honestly, like, what if the Pro Bundle just gave you... They're going to do Pro Bundle Part 2, Chapter Part 2?
I did see that's... Okay, I never confirmed this for my own sake, but like I did see like on multiple different Reddit threads, people saying this is why they're doing a Pro Bundle Part 2. And people like confirming that sentiment. So I'm like, I don't know where it is. I don't know if you want to try and find it real quick. But yeah, so apparently we're doing a Pro Bundle 2, the Electric Boogaloo. More cards.
What would you value it at if they sold you just a spotlight cache? They had a standing offer in the shop, purchasable like once a week, like you had a limit, or I guess once a day, whatever they want to limit it at. You have a limit of how many you could buy. How much would you spend for just a cache pop?
A spotlight cache. Well, a spotlight cache is every 120 collection level.
Right.
How many credits is that?
It's a week's worth of your dailies. They tried to even it out. So if you do just your dailies for the full week, that is 1 spotlight. Which is
what? Like 20, 50, 150, 170, 470, 500, 970. Like what? Just like 1,000 and like a weird ending number, like 1,070 kind of thing. Total credits, right, for weekly challenges. Isn't that it? No.
So it should be 6,000. It should be about 6,000 credits, right? Because it's 50 credits for 1 level on that green upgrade. And so then for the 120 collection level, you pay 6,000 credits.
Okay. So 6,000 credits is, you can pay 400 gold for 500 credits. So 6,000 divided by 5. So you're looking at, what? How much gold? 400 times 6. So 2,800.
1,200 gold, so it's like a premium variant. I imagine they would price it even higher though, somehow.
So they'd probably... so first off, asking what I would pay, $5.
Okay.
maybe 10. Like honestly, because
Oh, I get it. So you would pay the battle pass for 10, and then for $5, like the premium battle pass, if it just included a spotlight cache on top,
that'd be
that would be
nice.
appealing.
I think that'd be incredibly appealing because that's
Yeah,
like
I agree.
here's here's your season pass and battle pass, right?
Hmm.
Which you get the season pass card. Oh, and by the
Yep.
way, here's a random card that you might not already own.
Yeah. Or a
Um,
premium variant for something that you already
yeah,
do.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
like that.
I think that'd be a really good idea. But anyway, I was telling him, I was like, hey, conquest mode, going back to like alleviating the kind of pain from on
Yes,
my end,
yes.
is it's that competitive scratch because I think that playing the ladder, especially in pool 1 and 2, where he was at pretty much,
Yeah.
is mind-numbingly like boring, especially if you have no interest in those decks, right? Where
Yes.
conquest, yes, you still have the issue of like the decks might not be as super interesting on your end, but at least there's a bit more of that competitiveness to it and a bit more like ease of like retaining your attention as opposed to like just like rank go up, rank go down, right? A
Yeah.
better goal to work towards that might
Yeah.
help alleviate some of that issue of like not getting cards as fast as you want.
You can
Um,
also see a lot of the Pool 2 tech cards find great success. And that's where a lot of even high level play still revolves around landing the Shang-Chi, landing the Enchantress, predicting, do you hold back
yeah.
your priority card, playing around initiative, these nuance of things that you can dig into even with Pool 2 decks.
Well, a question I have for you
Oh
because I
boy.
just mentioned how when he started it was 76 cards in pool 3. Now
Yes.
it's 99. For comparison's sake, if I go over to Snap Zone real quick,
Yep.
just to because their collection is the easiest one I can look at from what
This is
I
a great
remember.
layout.
Yeah.
We're no longer sponsored, by the way, guys, but we still love them.
Yep. I'm happy to work with their website. So let's see. There is 98 cards in pool 3,
Yeah.
25 in pool 2, 46 in pool 1. I think the biggest discrepancy is the fact that pool 2 is only 25 cards.
Pool 2 always felt incredibly awkward to me, and I've gone on numerous campaigns of like, oh, this card should actually be in here, or this card should actually be in here, but the developers see they feel like there's no world where they actually change anything now.
I think they should. I think they should put some cards in. Like, honestly, if they take 30 cards,
Yep.
just flat 30 cards, go back down to 68 cards in pool 3, and then inject those 30 cards into pool 2, then you're looking at 55 cards in pool 2, and you actually have a nice growth there. You go from 46 to 55 to 68 as it currently stands for pools
Yeah.
1, 2, and 3. I think that's a nice little, curve, like a nice little growth, right?
Yep. Especially with how
Um,
daunting it can be to get a complete deck when you start just taking shots at the RNG lotto in pool
yeah.
3 of what you're opening. You're like, well, these two cards don't fit together at all. And it's something like Destroyer. I don't have the other Destroy cards to be able to run Destroyer, so I guess he sits on the shelf. And he's a cool
Correct.
card if you could build the deck, but you can't. And if you had more support coming from pool 2, I mean, heck, Destroyer could lobby as like a good pool 2 deck even. I think he
Oh,
could be a
it would
fitting
be
archetype.
it'd be a phenomenal pool 2 deck because
Yeah.
you just play Armor, Cosmo, and you still have Spectrum, right? You can play Sunspot if you want to. You can do like Ebony Maw things. Like that'd be a fantastic deck. It's mostly pool 2 and 1 cards anyway, right?
Okay, so maybe
Wizard.
that one fits a little bit better.
Oh yeah, and the Professor X. I'm looking
Yeah,
right
there
now
we go.
through them all. Yeah, this is basically a pool 2 card deck. Yeah, because that was the appeal of when Destroyer was 16 power of basically being like he's your only pool 3 card in the deck.
Okay, so a great example of someone who could move down, but maybe a poor example for feeling bad about pulling him in pool 3.
Yes, yeah, I understand
Okay,
that.
yeah. Yeah, I feel like Patriot and Electro and Destroyer could all go down into pool 2, and they could play alongside the Devil Dino world and spice it up for players down there to be able to have more experimentation with these different archetypes. Because, yeah, like Destroy and Discard are there, but they're so bad that you just play Dino and Zoo. So, yeah.
Yeah, and there are so many other cards I think could go down, like just for the sake of them being interesting. Some examples would be like Goose. I think could go down to pool 2. Would be a nice card for a lot of because a lot of people still try to play like Zoo in those
Yep.
levels, right?
Yeah,
And
100%.
Goose would fit in nice in that kind of shell, but it wouldn't be like oppressive to anything else.
Yeah.
Black Widow is another one. maybe Colleen Wing just to give just discard something better. I think you leave some stuff at pool 3, like maybe like Ghost Rider Hellcow can stay in pool 3, right?
Yeah.
But Colleen Wing, or maybe you say Hella is that kind of card. Um, yeah, there's Quake. I would say Quinjet's really cool. Ronin,
Yes.
I think maybe could even be in pool 3 as like a mirror competitive side to Dino if someone wanted to try that. Like, there's just so many of these cards that are like they don't feel like they should be in pool 3 entirely. It's just too much. It's too over bloated, and it's just going to get tougher for people moving forward as they enter the game or as they're in pool 3 trying to escape it with
Yeah.
all these cards. Because again, we talked about this before. If you or I were to take a step away, if we didn't have the content creation thing going on, right, and we
Yeah.
didn't have to stay and play Marvel Snap, which we don't technically, but we choose to, right? But if we didn't have this obligation, and we wanted to take a break from Marvel Snap for like what 2 months, and we were already in that position of like not being pool 3 complete, how the fuck do you complete your collection? Like in the span of 2 months, it's grown by like 20 cards.
Yeah, are you saying like accounts that like your friend's account? If we were friends
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
played and you didn't for 2 months, and then there's like no way to get parity after that.
Yeah, it's like, what do you do for the people that take a step away for a little bit? Because at least like things like Hearthstone, for example, if I were to take a break from that, which I don't even care about Hearthstone too much, I don't like it. I just know this is a good example. If I were to take a break from that game and I wasn't interested in the meta at the time, come back in like a couple months when they have a new set drop, and I can just drop money to get all the cards from that set, and then
Yeah.
basically be able to play again. You don't have that fallback monetary investment that you could do in Marvel Snap, which is also weird. It's like a missed opportunity, it seems.
It's like, yeah, it's like the developers are playing it up as a pro, but I can definitely see this side where it could be a con. They play up like their free to play experience. I think that you can argue that it could be much better, and I agree that it could be better in some ways. But I think overall, and compared to other mobile games, it's pretty good. But then the whale experience, actually, once you buy the battle pass, it's like the dolphin experience is good, which is very rare for one of these freemium mobile games. Just buying the battle pass for $10 a month is basically all that you need to do. If you want to hyper spend to be able to accelerate, the cost of getting new cards is ridiculous. The Pro Bundle does not give you very much for $100. Outright buying enormous chunks of gold does not get you very many cards for, again, $100. And so I'm sure that the people who do whale out are more on the cosmetic side. But for somebody who is entering now and wanted to catch up to like the competitive aspect to the game, they're looking at an enormous expenditure to be able to get to the top meta cards. And now Spotlight Caches might be able to throw a wrench in there and being able to target weeks where suddenly you can complete a meta deck by pulling a bunch of spotlighted cards all together with the newest stuff coming out. But yeah, compared to a set release and you just have X price on this pack and you get it all, Snap does not have that.
Yeah, I think I would like to see. I don't know if this would even be. It's hard to read the community sometimes in terms of what they want, because with any game at all that has any competitive leaning, people love to complain. But
well, yes, and the people who are contented are not speaking. And so as soon as you change something, then they're like, oh, but I liked it the old way. And you're like, well, all these other people did not like it the old way, so we changed it, and now... Yeah.
But I was going to say, like, if I'm not pool 3 complete, how would you feel about every single reserve from that's not a spotlight cache?
Yeah.
Keyword, not a spotlight cache. Any normal gold reserve, right? Is a guaranteed 100%. It's a pool 3 card every single time.
You're just saying like an insane catch-up mechanic.
Yeah. Basically you omit for the longest time. You omit tokens from those entirely for non-pool 3 complete players.
Okay.
You omit variants, any cosmetics, credits, boost. I guess not, boosters aren't even in those anymore. But anything that's not a card, pool 3 only, by the way. No, that means in those gold ones, 0% chance of getting a pool 4 or a pool 5 card if you are not pool 3 complete. It's purely only pool 3 cards, and then spotlight caches every 100 or 20. That's when you have a chance to get your 4 or 5.
Gotcha. I don't know. I feel like that's just like so fast. It would be daunting to people, but maybe it could work. depends on what else. Here's the thing: is that I know that there are a lot of people, even within my community, who have said that the card acquisition side of things was like the main driving motivation for continuing to play. And now that they are complete, they're way less motivated. They're thinking about maybe they go for completing sets of variants, but that is almost impossible to do right now. So it's way less.
Because most of them aren't even released.
Yeah, some of them are not released. Progress is very slow. You have to check daily in the shop, and then you just have to spend the premium currency to be able to get it. So as long as like the series 4 and 5 get large enough that there's still chasing to happen, then I think it works out. But that drip of progression, I feel like has to be there.
Yeah,
it's
I get
got to
that.
be there in some way, even if it's real slow. Like I'm telling you, man, if they gave you 1 credit at the end of every match, people would play more matches. And it's pennies. It's less than pennies, but people would play more matches. They'd be like, yeah, I made a credit. Or at the Conquest shop, tie back into Conquest, had an infinite purchase at a horrible ratio. Medals to credits, whoo! You'd see people tryharding probably a lot more because they're like, yeah, medals are on the line. Medals means credits. Credits means cards.
Well, speaking of Conquest, have you gotten your infinite bordered avatar?
I did it, Brad. Nobody beats Team Teddy 15 times in a row because that's how many times it took me to make it. Oh my gosh. We ran hours and hours of Conquest on stream on the main account. I had a huge stockpile of infinite tickets that I blew through. We made the finals plenty of times. We made round 4 plenty of times. I had to play a Lambie series in round 4 one time who won the UK creators. I was like, oh no. And then it was ultimately when we switched over to the free-to-play account that had quietly just done incredibly well. Basically, I was just doing that one to keep up with my dailies and accumulated 5 infinite tickets because it had an insane win rate. And then ran the bounce deck over there. I played the bounce deck. That seems to be the ticket. Got my hood in his shiny infinite border.
Hey, you also got the hood?
Yeah.
Let me show you something real quick, just so we can be the hood bros.
Yes.
So I also went with the hood as mine.
So good, so good.
And I went with this deck, by the way. My original version.
What am I looking at?
So Paper did this as well. So this is what happened. My original version that I posted a few weeks ago, or like 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
Because Paper follows me on Twitter. By the way, if you don't follow Paper, you should. Another great content creator in the space.
Yeah.
He also even did an interview with Bootman on his channel. But my original version was not running Killmonger, Shadow King, and Jeff in lieu of Enchantress, Miles Morales, and Polaris. Right?
Okay.
Some kind of consistency from the old Stature version, right? But instead doing like the Doc Ock Ghost Spider thing, which is awesome, by the way. So he took that list, tried it out, liked it, and then messed around with it, and then changed it to what you're seeing here with Jeff, Killmonger, Shadow King. And I was like, okay, I like the progression of this. I like the core that I had, but I do acknowledge that without Zabu, your 4s are a bit heavy at times, and I think it's a smart move to bring in some more 3-drops to kind of, ease out your curve a little bit for the games you don't draw Zabu, right? And Killmonger and Shadow King, phenomenal in the game right now against both High Evo as well as Bounce, of course. And then other decks too, like Shadow King against Destroy is really cool. Hitting a Venom back down to 3 or a Deadpool back down to 1, right? Those are always really cool cards. But the idea of the deck is to do a simple, normal Darkhawk strategy, right?
Yeah.
But Iron Lad has virtually no bad hits in the deck, I would say. Yeah, if you hit Shang-Chi early and you whiff, that kind of sucks. But hey, at least I know I'm drawing Shang-Chi. That's a cool thing. Yes. But then Doc Ock pulling down everything is great for two different plays. One, you pull down pretty much all their giant cards, right? Like Hulk, Abomination, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have to just like Shang-Chi their lane. Or if you can't beat that lane, you don't have Shang-Chi, you can Ghost Spider, you yoink him out of that lane and just be like, okay, bye. You can have that one. And then contest a different one. And then the other thing is, of course, sometimes you just get lucky and pull down all their bad cards. And like you pull down like
Yeah,
their
that's the dream
Wasp,
come true,
their
right?
Shocker, et
Yeah,
cetera, right? And you're like, oh, I just win that lane.
yeah.
Or I've had it where I pulled down like they only had one card left. I pulled down a Professor X and it just locked it down for me. I was like, oh, that's cool. So the deck is
That's
so
so
much
good.
fun, and this is a deck I think is really cool, and it kind of goes back into the idea of the meta itself.
Yeah.
It was hard. Like this, the runs were hard. It took a few times for me to get through Infinite. I think that it took 3 attempts. Side note: my first 2 attempts, I lost due to disconnection, which is basically a bug going on right now. That Marvel Snap is finally confirmed it
Yeah,
exists.
I did not lose any infinite to that, but I have just recently lost some silver runs to it.
Yep. So, and I put up some tweets being like, yo, what the fuck? And people
Yeah.
were like, your internet's just bad. Get better internet. And I was like, there's no fucking way it's my internet, my friends. And
It's
then
the
they
one where the turn
acknowledged
hangs
it.
up and then it puts you on like reconnecting, and by the time you
Yep.
come back in, the
Yeah.
turn has like dropped for you.
Yeah, and even if you
Yeah.
do it within like 10 seconds, like the second it pops up, okay, close the app, reload it, reconnect,
Yeah.
and then you all within 10, 15, even 30 seconds.
Your turn
And it's
is
like,
lost.
bye, you're gone, get the fuck out of here. It's so stupid.
I had
It's
that.
really dumb.
I think like the turn was lost, and so then I just wanted to retreat the game, and then it conceded the whole match, and I was like, oh no, because I was winning by so much. I was like mad that I lost the game, but I could have recovered. And then it was like, I did not mean to concede. I meant to just retreat. Please,
Yeah.
what's happening, man? So this deck is meant to be able to prey on the meta, right? This preys on Lockjaw, Evo, and this preys on Bounce with the
Yeah.
Shadow King shutting up Bounce, Killmonger, and then the Doc Ock able to do some, and the Shang-Chi able to do some funky things. Well, also I guess the rocks. A lot of stuff hits that Lockjaw.
of
He was
course.
not quite. I love the longer stints in the meta actually, because I feel like the game balance is a little bit better than the Reddit ever gives it credit for, and you end up seeing the adaptations and people growing around what had been the oppressive deck and realizing we do have answers. And I think that Haivo Lockjaw has slipped a little in terms of people's valuation, and with stuff like this able to find success, it's really exciting.
Yeah, and again, we talked about this before, and I've talked about it everywhere I can have a mic in front of me and say my piece, right? Pilot skill always trumps deck overall power, at least in terms of like looking at like your skill level versus your opponent's. If I'm extremely skilled in this deck and I've piloted it hundreds of games and I know every intricate line in and out, and I know how the deck works, when I want to do X thing, when I want to go ahead and do Y thing, that's incredibly powerful. And if I'm sitting across from someone that's just like, I just saw this deck's doing really well, I'm going to play it, but they don't have nearly as many reps in,
Yeah.
odds are I win those games more often than not. But of course, Marvel Snap is a game of variance and all that stuff. But High Evo and Bounce are still, I would argue, the best decks in Conquest at the moment. You got there with Bounce, of course, and Bounce is very flexible in what it can do in its flex spots. We're seeing Iceman versions, Spider-Ham, sometimes with both. Then like the Bast Iron Man thing, you can pivot into a more Sarah control kind of shell that's running things like, Sarah, of course, herself, Shang-Chi, Sentinels, like do a bit more of that kind of thing. I personally like the Sarah control one more than regular Bounce, because what I'm doing, which I never see anyone do, by the way, I'm running Maximus in mine because I just want a big thing to drop in the last turn, and no one ever expects it. I don't understand why you wouldn't run Maximus in that kind of shell.
The
Like,
3/7.
he's
It's a great stat, or the 2/7 with the Sarah, right?
Exactly, right? On the last turn, and you're like, I don't care about them drawing. And then, like, you can still do your Hip Monkey, Kitty Pryde shenanigans and stuff, right? You still have your flexibility with Shang-Chi and things like that. I don't understand. Also, by the way, if you're doing the Sarah Control version, don't run, what's her name? Scarlet Witch. Run Jeff instead if you have him. I hate Scarlet Witch so much.
Why? That's how I got my infinite, baby.
RNG
I was on the
is
free to play.
bad.
I didn't own Jeff, and so I subbed in the Scarlet Witch instead of Jeff. I honestly think they're interchangeable. I love Scarlet.
But in general, when looking at these two decks, we saw Glenn talk about recently, got a little over a week ago. I don't know if we talked about it last week or not, if we did, rehashing it. But he did say that currently High Evo is not performing beyond their benchmark in ladder, but
Yep.
he is performing beyond their benchmark in Conquest. And I would probably assume that Bounce is in the same situation. And if Bounce isn't,
Yeah.
I think Second Dinner is smart enough to understand that Bounce is a complicated deck and that the average person not being good with it on the first few tries brings down that win percentage. And so it's like inflated a bit in the wrong direction, right?
Yes.
So how would you go about fixing some of this stuff? Like how do you balance around a mode that directly messes up potentially a deck's performance in a mode that it's seemingly okay in and not oppressive by any means?
Gotcha. The ranked versus conquest, if one deck is highly outperforming the other. I feel like, honestly, there's so much deck diversity. If it's doing too well in conquest, you nerf it and you let the ladder people play something else, or get good. One or the other. I feel like it's still surprising to me that it's not doing as well in ranked, because I feel like the lockjaw shenanigans can have a lot of surprise bursts to be able to win a lot of cubes. Maybe it's like just looking at win rate is not as good, but then cube gain is still doing well for it. There's so many different stat metrics to look at in Snap because you're looking at both win rate and cubes. But if I was on the balance team and I saw something was overperforming, even if it was doing well in ranked and then not doing well in conquest like at all, I would cut it. And just, you're going to have some of these decks that maybe do become a one-side specialist, something like Galactus and Hela. There are these trick bag decks that do much better in ranked and will not do as well in conquest. And I think the community just kind of understands that. You're in a different mode, but I want that mode's experience to still feel like it has an open meta.
Right. So when
and
it comes
especially
to
with they've put a lot of currency rewards on both. And so I think that they should try and make both to feel like their own experience and a fair experience.
So what would you do with high Evo? Like, what would you change?
We're hitting cards, baby. I mean, I'd taken Wasp down quick. Just hits one target.
Yep, agreed.
Hulk, I feel like, is when the Lockjaw deck is just high Evo only for the sake of Wasp and Hulk, that definitely feels like a bit of an outlier there. So I feel like Hulk has to come down. He's got to either grow slower or hit a ceiling at some point. Either if that ceiling is 18 or 16, don't let him be the 20 plus point psycho that can guarantee win a lane. He's generating just too much.
So I have a double thing to say because I have some ideas.
Yeah.
First thing with Wasp, I agree she only hit one.
Yeah.
Although maybe if they keep her at hitting two, you know how Lockjaw has the once per turn clause?
Yep.
What if we gave Wasp a once per game clause?
Okay, that she only...
Because I played a game the other day where I played against High Evo. They didn't play Jane at all. They had the High Evo Wasp on 3. Or I'm sorry, not High Evo. Lockjaw Wasp on 3, right?
Yeah.
And then turn 4, drew Wasp. Turn 5, drew Wasp. Turn 6, drew Wasp.
Yes.
That's negative 8 power they put in that lane. That's insane.
It is wild when they get those top decks. I actually had somebody wonder of what if Lockjaw, rather than shuffling the card, cycles a random card and then puts the new card on the bottom of the deck. So you're guaranteed not to top deck it. You could still resummon with Jane, but you're guaranteed not to see these Mjolnir or Wasp top decks.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting idea.
It's hard to figure because that might... In some instances, that might make their top decks better by getting rid of the Wasp and stuff. It's right. Hard. You'd have to see the math behind it, right? But yeah, I'd either want to see Wasp get knocked down to only hitting one, which I think is the easiest fix. But I think that having it limited as a once per game effect seems really interesting in my mind. And it has to be doable if they can do the once per turn, right?
Right.
The other thing is Hulk. If they do the +1, I've seen some people think that it doesn't grow fast enough, or not, it doesn't get big enough to feel like Hulk. The reason they like the Hulk as he is right now is because he feels like this character. Whereas a 6/12, he doesn't. So I have two things, because these have to go at the same time. Otherwise, this rework doesn't make sense in the context of other cards. Hulk gets changed to a base 6/14, +1 each turn. Okay? Giganto gets reworked. to being a 6'8" or a 6'9", can play anywhere. If you play it in the far left lane, he gets like +7 power and gets a little bit of a buff, more so than where Hulk is now instead of 6'14".
Okay, so he's the Giganto is like
like an Atlantean, but
like a Nimrod, just getting the bonus on one specific lane.
Yeah. So instead of locking him only to the left lane, let him play everywhere else, but give him a huge buff if he's played in the left lane.
Okay.
Because also he doesn't see play anymore. Like even in the Lockjaw list where he did see play, in the normal one, you don't.
People started cutting him out, or he's just a summon, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that'd be interesting.
How do you feel about, do you angle like nerfing the high evo abilities hard to bring power up on his card, or do you like just light changes to the cards and then making him the actual 4-0 brick?
Yeah, so I think I've seen some people argue that like if you do these nerfs to the other cards, you have to like bring his power up. I don't agree with that. I think you can just leave him perpetually as a 4/4 and he gets played the same rate no matter what. Okay. Like unless they do something egregious and absolutely just destroy the way the Wasp or Hulk works and stuff like that, and they over nerf, which I don't think they will, by the way. I think they've learned their lesson with Leader about doing that.
Yeah.
So I think leaving him as a 4/4 is fine.
Like the Thanos and Galactus have both been nerfed at this point. They were both big bads who led the meta at one point or the other. And I think that they are in much, like the community would say, they're in much more healthy spaces right now.
And you can still win with them.
A little bit of a renaissance, and Galactus, people are still feeling out where he's going to land on ranked. I think he still does okay in Conquest. Yeah. Don't play him, but
which I would have said you don't play him on Conquest before he even got the nerf, right?
Exactly.
I was thinking he'd be a horrible deck to play.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think just doing something very simple like that with High Evo, and not worrying too much about like his own stats. You don't need to increase them. I don't think you have to go as far as making him a 4/0 brick that just exists in your hand. At that point, like also, I wouldn't mind seeing him change in general of like his entire cost and power. Like maybe he's just a 0/0. Like I don't know. Or go like a 1/0. Like why is he a 4/4? Like who cares? I think him he doesn't matter in this sense of like what he does, because the cards he brings is what the difference is.
Oh, 100%.
I will say,
but it's still interesting because there are times where he's the only play that you have, or there's times where Lockjaw cycles him up, and you're like, oh, I got the high evo. How good am I supposed to feel about that? Right now, I'm pretty sad. I could be really sad if he was a 0. My opponent's probably snapping on me if he's a 0. If he's a little bit more powerful, then I might be like, this was good. So it falls in an interesting spot, especially with that interaction. I've also seen, have you heard rumblings of what if Lockjaw was a 4-cost?
Then you lose out on your ability to do things as fast, or you lose one less cycle through.
You really want the perfect draw of Thor first, and then Lockjaw Wasp or Lockjaw Mjolnir on 4.
Now here's the question: it does get tighter, but does your curve get better in that situation? Because there are some times where like I'm looking at my hand based on what I have with Lockjaw, and I have Thor as well. Sometimes I choose to go Thor over Lockjaw just because I already have some big stuff in my hand, and I'm like, my hits aren't as good as they could be. But yes, you have an extra chance to draw your big stuff with Lockjaw, but now you don't feel as like worried about the 50-50 of like what's the right choice of Thor or Lockjaw. Now you just go Thor, shuffle Mjolnir in, then you go Lockjaw on 4 with like Wasp and stuff. Your curve arguably is better in that sense, I would think.
The perfect draw curve feels better, but I think that overall it loses a lot of flexibility of, when you don't have Thor and you're like, I have expensive cards and Lockjaw in deck, I do nothing until turn 4, like how am I catching up? And especially if you don't have Wasp to be able to combo immediately, I feel like it slows the deck down so much. The high roll is still there. The high roll is probably unchanged. But your average game experience, I think, goes down a lot.
Yeah, I don't necessarily like the thing about Lockjaw going down to or going up to a 4, I should say, just because we didn't have this problem with the traditional like Thor, like Jane Foster build of Lockjaw, with like I said, Giganto, maybe sometimes played Iron Man, like stuff like that before we got High Evo. That deck was very
so surprising to me because it's like you put +2 on Wasp, and then you throw in Hulk, who's a slightly more, either a more powerful Giganto or a more flexible Infinite.
Yep.
And then you're also running a bad card in the deck, in a deck that is really relying on not having bad pulls for Lockjaw. And that trade was enough. I guess the deck was always like okay, but it wasn't meta oppressive, and then it's really the Hulk's flexibility, right, that makes it meta oppressive.
I think so too. Yeah, that's what I agree with. And then you can go to the versions that run Dracula and stuff like that, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I think that it's more so the Haivo cards themselves as opposed to Lockjaw himself. I've seen some people say that Lockjaw shouldn't be in the game as he is. It's just like it goes against the game, even with the change to once per turn and stuff like that.
The game? What?
Goes against the way the game's supposed to be played, that kind of thing. It's
the way it's supposed to be played is one of these people is the way that it's supposed to be played. Gotcha.
Same thing with Galactus, right? Goes against the fundamentals of the game kind of thing.
Gotcha. Well, that one I would say would make more sense because it's like destroying the locations.
No, I agree. I don't know. I'm always very iffy about bannings and nerfs and stuff like that in any card game, except for Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! You just kind of live with it, and you're like, oh, they're going to hit something this month. Like, it's just what it is. But every other card game, I'm always super wary about wanting unbans, bans, nerfs, and things like that. Just because you can't look in a crystal ball and be like, oh, I know what's going to happen. I know this is going to happen. This is going to be the result of it. And the ripple effects I've seen time and time and time again from all these different games. And I'm like, ugh, that one felt kind of bad. Like it's always like especially like when it's also the lack of action or the incorrect action that can have horrible consequences.
Oh, the Thanos buff when he was the best deck in the world. Because the decks were behind the times by like a couple weeks.
Yeah, it's also weird how they have to, submit their buffs, nerfs, etc., weeks in advance when metas can change drastically. It's so archaic in the world that we live in today.
Thank you, Apple. Because they're changing the game code, right? And Apple is ensuring that it's not a security risk or whatever. Like that's the pretext.
Yeah, that's
get the patch approval.
That's annoying. And I mean, I play on my iPhone more so than anything else just because I no longer have an actual desktop, haven't for a few years because since I went back to school. I have a Mac for all my editing and stuff like that. And unfortunately, I just cannot play on the Mac as easy as I'd like to be. It's a powerful Mac. It can run Premiere, stuff like that. It's got 16 gigs of RAM. It's a good MacBook Pro. It's a good computer. But if I play games on it normally, right? Like games that I can actually play on the operating system, it runs perfectly fine. But if when it comes to Snap, I have to do a BlueStacks type of emulator thing for Android stuff, or I have to go do a virtual computer for like Parallels for like Windows, and then I'm basically dedicating 8 gigs of RAM to the Windows Parallel thing, and then 8 gigs to left over to run the operating system for Mac, and then if I want to stream, I have to dedicate RAM to that from 8. It's awful. It's a horrible experience. Yeah. I wish they gave it to me natively. But yeah, it's whatever.
So
I'll try
then,
not to complain too much.
So I feel like we are really in a 2-horse race of like the top of the meta. Do you give High Evo still the edge over Bounce? I've swung 60-40 Bounce in the matchup. Like if I met them in Conquest and
between the two of them, Bounce is the edge. Like in a direct between each one. Like if one person's playing Bounce, one person's playing High Evo, I give it to Bounce. Okay. However, against the field, I give it to High Evo.
Oh, really?
I think it's a little bit more flexible and has less counters. I think Bounce is the best counter of the game to High Evo for the Lockjaw version, just because of the flexibility of being able to go, oh, fuck that. I'm not going to go in the Lockjaw lane anymore and pivot to the other lanes.
Yeah.
A lot of decks don't have that ability.
Or match with the Iron Man if you got the chance to.
Exactly, right? Especially if you have like the nuts, like, bast into like your Angela, Hitmonkey, Iron Man kind of thing, right?
If Bounce is sitting on the nuts and the opponent doesn't have Sandman, it's a snap. Yeah.
But I think against the field, though, I do think that like, Bounce just has some natural enemies in the meta that can actually just be played in normal decks. Wave, you're seeing a lot more in decks that just don't really need to run Wave just as a tech. Maybe they want to, cheat out
Yeah.
of Doctor Doom a little early, or something like that, or but they have the option to hold it on turn 5, right?
Yeah.
Sandman Ramp is starting to show up a teeny bit more than we've seen before, right? And then Killmonger just slots in any deck you want to play that's not playing a bunch of sunspots, nebulas, and stuff like that on your own end.
Yeah.
So I do think that High Evo has a bit more flexibility against the field, but it's close. It's really close.
Okay. Interesting. I might even take bounce over the field.
Mm-hmm.
Partly because I feel like the High Evo Lockjaw, if the opponent has Shang, is already feeling a little bit iffy.
Yeah.
They're going to still have to keep throwing down their big boys, and if the opponent is sitting back with a Shang hidden in hand, I mean, the High Evo is like, well, I've got a great hand. I should snap, and they're like, well, this lane's gone. You actually stacked too much right here and just within range, so that honestly, there's times where like Odin has the 8 power. I'm like, thank you. You will you will persevere through the Shang-Chi.
Yeah.
And that makes them have to really think about it. Yeah, there was a while where I was running a High Evo mid-range with Hawk package, and then it also had Wave Dr. Doom. And so Wave would let me play Doom and Hulk together. It made it very easy to be able to pass energy at the same time, so you get synergies there. And up against Bounce, it's fantastic to have the Wave. But more and more like in a Conquest match, on ladder, Wave is going to murder Bounce, right? But in Conquest, if the opponent knows that it's coming, they can just dump on 5 and then drop either Iron Man or Chavez on 6 and still match your Wave. You have to have like Wave Odin to actually stop them, which is crazy.
Well, let me ask you this.
Yep.
Since you think that Bounce is better against the field, right? Albeit, I think we both agree they are pretty close together. Like in both of our opinions, each one is necking each other out by like this much. It's not like that. How would you change, if anything at all, with Bounce? Like what do you think is the target on its back? Like, is it Kitty? Is it Hitmonkey? Like, did they go too much with Beast? Should he just be a 3-2 instead of a 3-4? Because that extra 2 power I've noticed is actually pretty nice. So I don't know. What would you do?
That's interesting. If you just took Beast's power down, he's a huge facilitator for the deck. When you're looking at Bounce, I feel like there's so many different potential connections to the combos. I'm trying to think of who are the offenders that really hold it together. And Kitty as a 1 cost, especially the cheap cards, are very hard to nerf because just the tiniest change makes an enormous difference. The big finisher cards like Hulk, you're talking about 1 or 2 points off of what's a 620 right now. You're like, okay, I can deal with that. But if Kitty went up in cost, she's dead. If she goes starter at a negative power, that's something. Make it so that Kitty is not playable on turn 1. Also something, when they have the turn 1 Kitty, you're like, oh boy, they have to open with something else. Then, of course, the Nuts, which is Bast hitting the hand anyways. That's unchanged. Hitmonkey also is a huge pump up for the deck, and hitting him is really hard. He's a 2/0 +2. It feels like any change to cost, base power, ability power isn't satisfying somehow. Like it would be a huge nerf, but if he was like a 2/2 +1 on the ability,
what if a 1/0 +1?
A 1/0 +1,
or maybe a 1/1 +1. Like, where they brought down his cost a bit to like give you that more flexibility on those last turns to really do that huge dump. But overall, you're still losing a few points of power overall. But it's not a huge differential.
Interesting. So he's cheaper, but he gets less power per other card, but then you have space to play another card, and you get power from said other card. It could be interesting to play test around. Then is also vulnerable to the Killmonger, which the bounce is dancing around initiative at all times anyway. But often you'll try and set. It makes it the thing with that is it would make him way easier to be able to combo in the mid game for an early proc and then still beast him back to be even bigger. So I don't know if that's quite the direction they would go. But it could be interesting, especially because it opens up more counterplay with the Killmonger. Even heck, Elektra. If Monkey and Kitty are going around, maybe Elektra is something to look at. Man. Yeah, it's hard because then they also have so much power out of the Bishop and the Angela. That Shadow King looking better and better in your deck, Brad.
Dude, Shadow King is so good in this matchup. And I think I've seen a lot more people be a bit more smart about putting in Invisible Woman in their decks that just typically have no reason to put Invisible Woman. Just because they're hiding a Shang-Chi. Like, let's say against the Lockjaw deck. You just pop Invisible Woman in front of the Lockjaw lane, put Shang-Chi, leave that lane alone for a bit. Okay, go do your other things. Same thing with, Killmonger and Shadow King. Like, just locking these in behind so that way when bounce players can hop around priority, because that's what that deck is so good about doing, right?
Yeah.
Is hopping around priority, which maybe Ghost could be interesting in that sense. But hiding a card behind a card that says this flips at the end of the game when all their cards are already there, that's a huge boon to that deck as well. So I don't know, because like there's so many cards that work so well together. I'm a little shocked that Bishop's not a 3-0 yet.
Really? The thing is that he's so weak in other lists, but yeah, for bounce especially, he can pump up just insane.
I mean, I whenever I played bounce, I've gotten him to like a 3-12, not as hard as you would think it would be.
No,
right?
It's crazy. He's good. As long as you're hitting Mysterio, you get a big shot. I've had times where as long as I have like my early board set up, and then I got Bast on like Mysterio, the opponent comes out with Sandman. I'm like, well, I got Mysterio and he's a 2-cost. This is turn 5, but I'm going to play him and I'm going to scale with you. And then I drop my Chavez and I'm like, I win. Which that is madness to me. So yeah, he brings a lot.
Remember when Mysterio was a 2-5?
I do. 2-5 Mysterio, 3-2 Bishop, Collector at 2-0 plus 2 per card returned to hand. Moon Girl at a 3-3, you had dual collectors that were both scaling off of the Falcon and the Beast.
That deck sounds terrifying, and I don't want to be in a world where that exists.
You consistently had like multiple lanes with 15 power collectors, and the beta age bounce was also top of the meta.
Yeah. But I mean, as far as the viewers are concerned, let us know what you guys think about these two decks, your own experiences in Conquest, whether or not you hit Infinite or not. I mean, even if you didn't, don't worry about it. It's not that big of a deal. It's really hard. It's really hard. And don't feel bad if you haven't done it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And of course, let us know what you think you should do or Second Dinner should do in regards to the changes maybe to High Evolutionary or Kitty Pryde. We have another week and a half till the next patch, which is going to be on the 11th. So we got some time in between. We'll see what happens. And of course, Teddy, now we're going to hand off to your show. Oh, yeah. Don't stop snapping. We're going to hand it off to Teddy's show now. So go over to his channel to check out part 2, where we talk about the new season of Phoenix Force and some complaints from the community, as always. But we'll see you over there.
Are these new cards going to shake up the meta? Let's find out.
Bye.
Can't Stop Snapping is a podcast hosted and produced by Brad Saffer and Teddy Ninja, originally created by Michael Thurman.